All right, we're live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's live. We'll get started in just a minute if you're watching it on the recorded version. So just hang on tight.
All right, we can get started.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Helen. I'm an attorney at Waypoint Immigration, and I specialize in EB-2 NIW applications and also a lot of EB-1As. So today we're going to talk about how to choose between applying for EB-1A versus the EB-2 NIW. So just kind of like a brief recap on both. So they're both self-petitions, meaning that you do not need an employer to sponsor you for either one of these. It will lead to a green card, so that is the entire point for both of them. However, neither one would grant you a status. Neither one will give you any work authorization up until you actually get your green card in hand. So if you are already in America or want to be in America, it would have to be on an underlying application until your priority date is current. So for EB-1A, it is current for rest of world countries. So those are ones that are not like Mexico or China, Philippines, India. Actually, some of those might be current too, but it's definitely not for India. And the EB-2 NIW, there's a backlog for everybody. So no matter what country you were born in, there is a backlog of at least 3 to 5 years, and definitely a lot longer for those in China or especially India. So there's some special considerations for those people from those countries, but I'll get to that later. So the EB-1A is the first preference category, which is why there is no backlog for people in the rest of the world, because it's a very high threshold to meet. Not a lot of people meet it. But if you do, it would be able to grant you a green card. So this is for people with exceptional ability. And it's showing that you're at the top of your field, that you're a top professional, you have a specific niche of expertise and things like that. And in order to qualify, you have to show that you either A, have gotten something extraordinary like a Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, an Academy Award, something that is, kind of worldwide recognized as something that one would receive at the very, 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 very top of their field. Otherwise, most people qualify by showing that they meet at least 3 out of 10 criteria. And these are things like you have a leading or critical role, you have a high salary in like the top 10% of earners based on your base salary. You have an original contribution, something that is both original and also impacting your field, like other people are using it. You've authored, scholarly articles in, journals or major media. You might have a membership, but this is not just any sort of membership. It's usually like a fellow level or something that is higher up. Even like if you're just a senior IEEE member, that is not enough for EB-1A. So definitely membership is harder to qualify for because those are hard to achieve. But that might be something that you can achieve or have already achieved. Some other things here, let me think. A judge role, that one is usually easier to actually check off the box, showing that you've done like peer review or did some sort of a role where you oversaw other professionals in your field and used your expertise in order to give out your opinion. Media attention, where some sort of media outlet has used your name in specific as a reference to your expertise. A nationally or globally recognized award. So that could be also used. And there's a few others there that, like commercial success, that has to do with art and things like that. Not many of our clients are ever able to claim that just because we don't get people with those profiles, but certainly, that is something that it could be considered if you are in the arts or performing arts or something like that. I'm probably missing one or two, but you can certainly look up the entire list on the USCIS policy manual website. They have them all listed out there. You have to show that you meet at least 3 out of the 10. And for this, we like to show that you have like an anchoring criteria is what we call it. So usually it's critical or leading role or original contributions, where you kind of show that you have, this criteria is really strong for you, because not only do you have to meet at least 3 out of 10, but you also have to meet final merits determination. So, the USCIS officer could say, oh, yes, you have met 3 out of the 10, but, you don't really meet the final merits and therefore you're denied, or you got an RFE or something like that. So it's not enough just to say that you meet at least 3, any 3. That's why I'm saying, like, if you meet critical leading role or original contributions, those tend to lend themselves to show that you are at the top of your field more. Just because you have like that super important job title, you've made something that's super spectacular, that's making waves across the industry, other people are using it, that sort of a thing. So for this application, obviously it's open to like business, STEM, and arts type of profiles and things like that. And it's to show that you are at the top of your field. So, this is typically not for people just starting out in their career. I mean, you certainly could probably qualify if you are some sort of superstar. So, that's not necessarily a qualifying aspect. If you have something that's really strong, and you could still qualify, but it just tends to lend itself to someone that is a little bit more senior because of the leading critical role aspect. But then if you don't have that, say that you're some sort of research scientist, you can then maybe use original contributions as your founding, your anchor criteria and things like that. So the next one, EB-2 NIW, is different in that the threshold is a lot lower, but the important part is that you have to show your work is in the national interest. So your work has to extend beyond your employer. It has to be impactful to the United States. It has to align with different goals of the country, and you have to show proof that, oh yes, the government is interested in furthering this particular thing because they have different executive orders, or different agencies have different agendas or strategies that are showing that they do want to continue advancing these different aspects and things like that. So if you are looking between EB-2 NIW and EB-1A and you are not from India, EB-2 NIW may make sense because the threshold, like I said, is lower, but your work has to be in the national interest. So, we get a lot of people in AI, in machine learning, and different kind of healthcare scenarios, integrating different medical tools or AI into healthcare. People have to do with infrastructure, cybersecurity, engineering, infrastructure, with roads, or like building, like urban planning, even in the green energy space, solar energy, or things along those lines, to show that what you are doing is impactful beyond just your company. And it really does depend on what kind of evidence you can also supply too. So there's a lot of research that has to do with NIWs in a different way than EB-1As. So there's definitely different kind of exhibits and things that we attach to an EB-2 NIW that's not really applicable to the EB-1A, because the EB-1A doesn't have that same level of national interest that the EB-2 NIW has. But they are both similar in that, you can use a judge role or a publication or something like that for an EB-2 NIW, or potentially even an EB-1A, depending upon, how they kind of fit into the different criteria. So If you are in a field kind of similar to what I mentioned, where what you are doing is impacting the country, beyond your employer, EB-2 NIW could be a good fit for you. If you are doing something that is not really aligned with the national interest, you're not really impacting more than just your employer, but you're in the top of your field, you're, still, making a lot of waves in your industry. It's just maybe not viewed in that same kind of way. You could do an EB-1A. If you are from India, a lot of people start off with an EB-2 NIW because you can get, like I said, this is like a lower threshold. So people that are in these different industries, as long as you're in that national impact scenario, you can get your priority date under an EB-2 NIW. And then you can do some profile building or working, on your career, doing different activities, getting a better, higher job title, higher salary, different things that I already mentioned. And then you can apply for EB-1A and use your EB-2 NIW priority date. So that way, they can apply that date to your current one, and therefore your wait time for your green card will be significantly cut, or you may even be current by that time, because then you could use the older priority date for your EB-1A. So it could be advantageous for those with countries with giant backlogs, such as India, to do both and just do one, step one, EB-2 NIW, get my priority date. And then step two, do your EB-1A, and then you could get your green card so much faster, because some analysts say, it's at least 10 years to like 90 years for those from India to get a green card through the EB-2 category. And EB-2, includes NIW and also the PERM process. So if you go through PERM and you have an EB-2, the backlog is the same for NIW and for PERM at the same time, because the EB-2 category has the same dates, for both applications. So then, once you're able to get your, they're both I-140 applications. The form is I-140. So then once you get these approved, it does have some benefits even before your priority date is current. If you're an H-1B holder, both applications would allow you to renew your H-1B up until, continually until your priority date would become current. Like I said, neither one will grant you any status. So you would have to stay in H-1B, or if you're an F1, OPT, or whatever the scenario is, maybe you're on even a different status than those two. Those are just the ones that I most commonly see. So, it does give you that ability to renew your H-1B, both of them, up until you can get your green card, and you can do that. If you're not in America, these are open to anyone across the world. You don't have to be in America. You don't have to have a particular status. As long as you meet the criteria where EB-1A, you can claim at least 3 out of 10 and show you're at the top of your field. You would, use that in the context of what that looks like in your country. An EB-2 NIW, you could show that your work is impactful to America. Like, even though you're not in America, America still wants to further whatever it is that you're working on. If you do have any ties to America, like getting a recommendation letter from someone in America in your field to show that someone with your skills is capable of making an impact now in America once you would get your green card, that's kind of a good way to bridge the gap from the work that you're doing in your country to the work that you would be doing in America, if you got your green card in this way. So, sorry, my mouth is getting dry. So, so either way, they're both similar in that, you could use critical role type of things for NIW to show that you are well positioned. And I think that that's where people kind of maybe tend to get these two confused. So part of the NIW, the second prong to show that you are well positioned to actually make the impact and things like that you're claiming you'll do to America, you have to do a deep dive into your background. So, we're talking about your education, your experience, if you have any sort of, volunteer activities like presenting at conferences, if you've obtained any certifications or additional educational type of things. We can use all of that stuff for an EB-2 NIW, but the level that it is used for EB-1A is just a lot higher. So, there's a deeper dive into, if you have a scholarly article that you've written, they're going to look, okay, well, are you like a technical person, like in STEM, where you're not normally expected to have authorship? They're going to say, okay, well, maybe just a few things that are published in, scholarly journals is enough, but then they're going to maybe see if you have a researcher profile, they're going to maybe want to see a higher level of research and a higher level of citations, higher level of authorship. And it's just viewed differently for EB-1A than it is for EB-2 NIW. And a lot of the wording also can be kind of similar and maybe confusing if you're just starting out learning about these two different options. But just realize that the EB-2 NIW, the evidence that they look at that you can provide, the threshold is just lower. They're still going to maybe want to see some of these things, but your impact and, because EB-1A, you're saying you're at the top of your field. You don't have to be at the top of your field for EB-2 NIW. You can be just starting out. You can have, been impactful. EB-2 NIW is a lot about your future impact, and EB-1A is all about what you've already accomplished. So that's also something important to kind of distinguish. EB-2 is about potential impact, and EB-1A is all about what you've already done. Of course, that you will continue down the same pathway and things like that, but it's just definitely viewed differently. An EB-2 NIW has a proposed endeavor where you're explaining to the government what your plan is for the future. How will you actually do these things? What methods will you use? We don't talk about a proposed endeavor at all with an EB-1A. That's not part of that kind of an application. You're maybe talking more about your specific field and your niche and how what you're doing is important and very highly specialized, and it's just a different way of telling your story under the two different contexts. But ultimately, if you do have that national impact part of what you do, EB-2 NIW is typically the better way to go, just because it has a lower threshold of what you have to show, and therefore hopefully you would be more likely to be approved. But if what you're doing is not really in the national interest, but you are in the top of your field, you could do an EB-1A. And like I said, if you're from India, you might want to consider doing both. So that way you can get your priority date with one and then use it for the next level once you kind of can achieve that sort of a thing. So yeah, I guess maybe one other thing to say is that these are both kind of step one in the green card process, the I-140, and then the step two would be adjusting your status or going through consular processing once your priority date is current. So if anyone has any questions, of course, please feel free to put it into the comments, and we can go through any questions or common questions that Jason maybe think people have. So I can stop talking now and we can see if anyone has anything to add.
So quite a few questions. Caesar asks, can a job offer from an employer qualify for the high salary criteria? Obviously, counting that the salary in the job offer is higher than the median salaries in U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics for that specific role. For instance, for construction managers, the median pay is $106,980 per year.
It's not just a job offer. It has to be a job that you've accepted and you have. So, a job offer that's a high salary, I don't think is going to really kind of cut it for this kind of an application. You have to show that, it's a salary that you've had and offer, a job that you've had. But using the Bureau of Labor Statistics is a good place to look for those those numbers specifically, like you mentioned, because that's what USCIS will want you to pretty much compare to. And you can use other job sites too, like I can't think of any off the top of my head. I use them all the time, but I'm like blanking out for some reason. But there's other, wage kind of statistic websites you can also use, but Bureau of Labor Statistics is definitely like the gold standard to start with.
If you're working in national interest activities, could that be considered final merits in EB-1A?
No, final merits is considered that you're at the top of your field. So you have to show that you are more likely than not at the top of your field. So that's the argument that they're looking for final merits. So it really has to do with just being at the top. That's what they're looking for. Like, okay, when I see this entire profile in front of me, okay, they might meet 3 criteria, but is this 3 criteria evidence that they really are at the top? That's what final merits is about.
Samuel asks, I work for a company as a project soil scientist and natural resource consultant on solar, wind, and oil projects across the U.S. Would you suggest getting letters from clients to show I led the project and also from my manager to claim the critical role? I also work for the Soil Health Institute on a funded project. Can I as well get a letter to show my critical role? Also, I work as a community scientist for the AGU project in South Carolina. Can I get a letter for that too?
So for critical role, using letters is definitely like a really good way to show the evidence, and that is actually what is kind of expected at this point, that USCIS wants to see letters for those specific roles. And you can, it has to be with a distinguished organization. So if your organization has that kind of a reputation, so you show what your critical role is, what makes you unique, what makes you like super important for the company, that your role is so like niche and specialized that they rely on you heavily because of those skills that you have obtained. So that's part of critical role. And then you also have to show that your organization has that distinguished reputation as well. So, I'm not as maybe familiar with some of the ones that were mentioned there, but if you can show that you have both the critical role aspect and that it's for a distinguished organization, you can claim it for more than one position that you've had, and you can claim it for a position you are no longer in. So it could be from a past position as well. You don't have to currently be in the position of the critical role that you are claiming. So a lot of our clients claim, their current role in like a past role, or it could be an important role in an organization that you're even not even paid for. But, you do lend yourself to that critical role plus the distinguished organization aspect.
Currently in EB-2 NIW, that's the average percentage of applications in your practice that are being approved. I have the impression the approval rate has been increasing.
I don't have like any sort of statistic. Like, I'm not sure if that's something that we actually measure. But I definitely have been seeing a lot of approvals, and we have seen also a lot of RFEs, but we've also seen some of these RFEs get approved as well. So, I guess I would say it's still kind of like a mixed bag, but I would agree we have seen maybe more approvals are a little bit more on the uptick. I don't want to jinx anything, but yeah.
Cole asks, does it make sense to apply for EB-1A in case of EB-2 NIW approval for all other countries, not China or India? Is there any potential application conflict, or is it better to wait for EB-2 NIW?
Oh, well, you can apply for both. And they don't really interact with each other. So you could always try for both. They're just very, they are different applications. So, it's interesting to see that it sounds like you think that you could do EB-1A, but not EB-2 NIW. If you can do EB-1A, of course, that would be the better route because, if you're not from China or India, you have no wait for your green card. But for EB-2 NIW, it is probably 3 to 5 years at the moment, and it could certainly go higher than that, with any sort of future delays added into the mix. But, if you think that you can do EB-1A, I would certainly try. And if you have any sort of a question, we have an assessment on our website that's free that you can put in for both EB-1A and EB-2 NIW assessment. If you think you may qualify for both, I would put in your free assessment under EB-1A, and then we could say, oh, maybe you don't qualify for EB-1A, but we think you make a great EB-2 NIW application or something like that. So, feel free to utilize that free resource.
Last two questions. Based on your personal opinion, do you think the EB-2 NIW backlog is going to increase?
Yeah, I mean, we used to say it would take like 2 to 3 years to get a green card from a row country, and now we're kind of saying it's more like 3 to 5 years. So definitely giving out different advice these days, and hopefully that number won't be changing to worse than that. Of course, it's hard to kind of speculate. We always know more in October when it's the start of the fiscal year, and we can see how much farther that visa bulletin will move at that point to kind of be able to adjust that idea in the future.
Philan asks, EB-2 NIW versus EB-1 for entrepreneurs. What has been your experience for success cases?
Well, I know for EB-2 NIWs, if you're saying that you want to start a business, there's a little bit, more involved in that. You have to show that not only do you have whatever the expertise is that you're claiming, but you have to show that you have business skills as well. So you'd have to show like a business plan, if you have financial backing, if you have potential clients or customers, is there a need for your business? And then the business itself would have to also, like the work the business does has to be in the national interest. So, you can't just say I'm going to open up a pool company because it has a localized economic impact. Obviously, you're adding to the economy and you're also probably hiring people, but that's not enough. Your business itself has to also, the work it does has to be in the national interest. So for like opening up the pool business scenario in EB-2 NIW would not work. And for EB-1A, you have to show you're at the top of your field. So it's a little bit different with the different criteria that you're doing that with. So it's just kind of different things to take into consideration.
Great. That was the last question. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I mean, it may not make sense if you are not from India or China to do the EB-1A. If you have like a weaker case or you're not sure if you really qualify, it may not make sense to put your efforts into that. If you can qualify for EB-2 NIW, the wait is still a couple of years, but it's about 3 to 5. So it's not, too long, unless that of course changes, in which if the backlog gets worse, then it might make sense for anybody to go for an EB-1A instead of the EB-2 NIW. So I think, people really need to kind of ask themselves, is my work in the national interest? If it's not, do I want to put forth all of the effort that it may take in order to get your profile ready for EB-1A? It's certainly an undertaking, that not everybody wants to do in their own life. You have to kind of figure out what are your priorities, what's important to you, what do you want to put forth your efforts into, and, definitely take personal choice into consideration as well. Because I've talked to people that are, really, really wanting EB-1A, and they put forth a lot of effort. They're very organized. They're, very much about adding to their own knowledge as to how do I actually do these things? What evidence should I gather? And there's some people I've talked to that are just like, it's a lot of effort and that's just not where I want to put my energy right now. They have other maybe personal family things going on and they just don't have that same kind of vision. And an EB-2 NIW may just work out fine for their particular scenario. So, I guess the bottom line is asking yourself, what do you want to prioritize? Where do you see your life going? What kind of things do you want to aim for? And, if you have any question, if your profile is ready for either one of these, again, like I said, our website has those free assessments. And if you actually go to our website, it's waypointimmigration.org. And at the top, you'll see a little tab that says free assessments. And then it brings you down to choosing to apply an assessment for EB-1 or for EB-2 NIW. So, you could definitely utilize that. We try to get back to people within 7 to 10 days. One of our attorneys will physically look at your response and render an opinion. We all work on both of these applications all day, every day. So, feel free to use that, or you can obviously make a consultation with one of us. We have that as well. If you go to the top of the website, there's something that says appointments, and then you can choose your appointment type, EB-1A or EB-2 NIW, or career planning. Maybe you're just starting out and you're not really sure and you want to just talk about all of the options. So there's differently resources there, and it's best to also kind of talk one-on-one because everyone's scenario is different. Everyone has different strengths or weaknesses in their profile, and it's good to always kind of have a conversation about it.
Right. All right, then. Thanks everyone.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we'll see you next week if you care to join again.